fiscal 26 budget. It's our last workshop ahead of our meeting tomorrow, when where we're going to vote on the budget. The first item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. You can do that. Pledge allegiance to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There you go. Lisa, all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Aziz. Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. So we had sent you a bunch of documents over the weekend. The documents are posted on the district website, correct, Ms. Saketa? And what we thought might be good is the administrative team met on Friday afternoon and kind of put together a sort of a topic presentation, if you will, that we think might address some of your questions and your feedback, and then at the end we can you can ask some more specific questions if that's helpful. I believe that we are going to start this morning. There has been a lot of questions about the mental health providers, the roles and the responsibilities of them, and I would like to let Tracy Edwards kind of go through that for us this morning. And the explanation, if you're looking, is in Board of Education Workshop January 27th document, page 1. Dr. Edwards.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk a little bit about mental health services and staffing in our 4 schools during today's workshop. Before I speak about the structure of mental health services in the district, I do want to provide some context about the PPS special education budget in general, that I think is important information as we review any of the related line items. While we have seen declining enrollment in Weston, we have seen a steady increase in the number of students who are qualifying for special education services, which, just so we're on the same page, that's consistent with the trend that's being observed across Connecticut and also nationwide. To add some flavor to that, in the 2021 school year, 11.9% of students in Weston qualified for special education services. The statewide average at that time was 16.3%, so we were almost 5 percentage points below the state average. Since then, the identification rate has increased in Weston to 12.6 in the 21-22 school year, 13.7 in the 22-23 school year, and 15.6 in the 23-24 school year. Last year, the 23-24 school year, the statewide average was 17.9%. So we're still below that state average, but there's less of a discrepancy between our identification rate and the state. In addition to that increase, the increase in the number of students who are qualifying for special education services, we also have more students qualifying for 504 accommodation plans. And as we've discussed in terms of previous budget recommendations, we have more students requiring multilingual learner support, or MLL support, in our district. So with that kind of broader context, I want to discuss mental health services specifically. It's important to note here, I think, that our staffing in the area of mental health support has actually remained flat in the 5 years that I've been in the district. Remembering in that time, we were coming off of the pandemic and, of course, have more students who are requiring support. We did make a couple of shifts in the model. So we shifted from school counselors to social workers at both Hurlbut and WIS, but the headcount in both of those buildings remained consistent. You also might remember, and I'll talk more about this morning, that we added a social worker position at the high school to support our Pathways program. But that was replacing a contracted services program that was provided by an outside agency, and actually at that point represented a cost savings in the district budget. So we've had a lot of conversation and question about what do our mental health professionals do within the district. So I want to provide an overview of that without rehashing everything on the question and answer sheet, beginning at Hurlbut and WIS. There's a lot of continuity in the mental health support structure in those two buildings, and the roles and responsibilities of the providers in those two buildings are very similar. Hess and WIS each have a school psychologist and a school social worker. As I mentioned, we had social workers replace school counselors at the elementary level. I made that recommendation because social workers bring a different level of expertise regarding mental health challenges and the impact on students' social, emotional, and behavioral functioning, both in and out of the classroom, which I thought was more appropriate for our youngest learners. At Hurlbut and WIS, the school psychologists provide individual and group counseling. They provide small group social skills opportunities. Families in the district might hear about those. They're called Lunch Bunch generally. They support the implementation of social emotional learning programs in general education classrooms, in this case, ruler and responsive classroom. And they attend various meetings to support students with IEPs, 504 plans, intervention plans. They provide support during crisis situations, and they serve as resources for colleagues and families to support the well-being of our youngest learners. I want to underscore here and throughout this that our mental health providers in all 4 schools do not just work with special education students. They provide a range of support and services to a range of students, and those needs can vary throughout the school year. The school psychologists specifically at both Hurlbut and WIS and across all 4 buildings also have the responsibility of conducting all psychoeducational evaluations for initial and triennial reevaluations within special education. That's an important role and responsibility, and so I wanted to highlight it here. As we transition to the middle school and the high school, consistent with the model at Hurlbut and WIS, each building has 1 social worker and 1 school psychologist. The providers in these buildings are using DBT Steps A as their guiding framework for social emotional support, and their roles and responsibilities are honestly very similar to that I just described for Hurlbut and WIS, so I won't repeat myself. At Weston Middle School, in addition to the school psychologist and the social worker, there are 3 school counselor positions, 1 for each grade level, which aligns very closely with the teaming model that I know Dan has discussed in previous meetings. And that teaming model, we've talked about how important it is for a consistent group of adults to be working with students in those respective grade levels. Our counselors provide individual and group counseling. They work with students to support course selection and scheduling and also assist in transition planning. They also respond to crisis situations as needed. They develop, I think, most importantly, 3-year relationships with students and often serve as a primary point of contact for families when there are concerns about their child's social, emotional, behavioral, or academic performance. Our counselors participate in core team, intervention meetings, 504 meetings, and PPTs, and they also case manage all students with 504 accommodation plans. Our counselors are also responsible for coordinating the advisory program and serve as resources for students, families, and colleagues in developing support plans for students at school. Weston High School has 5 school counselor positions, including 1 school counselor who serves as both a school counselor and the director of guidance, so she has a reduced caseload. Counselors at the high school also follow students for all 4 years, which is consistent with the structure at the middle school. And as a result, they too serve as a primary point of contact for families and school staff. In addition to all the roles I described at the middle school, the high school counselors guide students through the college and career exploration process in coordination with our college and career counselor, assist with applications, standardized test registration, scholarship searches, and financial aid applications. Our college and career counselor, who I know has spoken at length with all of you as a board every year to describe her work with students in grades 10 through 12, provides individualized support to juniors and seniors to ensure access to the resources necessary for post-secondary planning. She's also the person who plans and facilitates the Camp College Summer Enrichment Program. Again, the theme here is that these providers are working with our whole school population, not just students who have special education or 504 accommodation services. Finally, we have one social worker at the high school who's dedicated to the Pathways program. This program has been in place since the 21-22 school year and replaced a program that was previously offered by an outside agency, which was more costly and honestly less effective than the program in place now. The Pathways program is a school within a school model designed to support students with complex, internalizing social emotional challenges. Within this program, students can access some or all of their coursework within the Pathways program, while also participating in electives and other general education opportunities. The Pathways social worker is providing ongoing individual and group counseling and is in regular communication with families, outside providers, and school staff. She's also participating in PPTs, team meetings, and works very closely with building and district administrators to support students who are returning from day placements, residential placements, and sometimes hospitalizations. I do just want to point out that without this program, we could expect to see an increase in the number of students placed outside of the district in therapeutic day placements. We've discussed our moral and ethical obligation and legal obligation, actually, to provide programming in what we call the least restrictive environment. And this program allows students to access the offerings of Weston High School while providing them with the individualized social emotional support they need to access school. From a financial perspective, given that we are talking about budget planning, it's important to remember that out of district placements are often averaging above $100,000 per year, not including the cost of transportation, which is a required related service. In short, our ability to provide the mental health services across the district directly impacts students' ability to access instruction in the classroom. This team has worked extremely hard in the last several years in particular to provide the personalized, individualized attention that we talk so much about in our budget meetings to all of our district students and their families. And the proposed budget maintains the staffing levels that are needed to meet those needs for all of Weston's students. I'd be happy to answer. Thank you for listening. That was long-winded. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about any of that information.
Hi, Tracy. Thanks a lot. I mean, I realize how important our support services are and how much they're doing. And I really appreciate you taking the time to get us the support documents and give us this analysis of exactly what they do. I just have some questions. How many students are in our Pathways program?
It varies year to year. The
Or-
maximum number of students for that program when we designed it was 15. We have between 10 and 12 right now. I don't know the exact number, but between that window.
I was just wondering about that. So, I looked at page 73 of the budget, where you have all the support services for our 2,053 students. And these support services run across most school districts, and you're doing a wonderful job of personalizing and individualizing the support services for students. My wonder becomes, and I'm going to do more of a gross analysis, and you can let me know that you've have the support services between counselors and social workers. So I count that as 9 counselors and 5 social workers, which are 14. And so the caseloads are well under 150, but the state caseloads for guidance counselors and social workers are best practice 250, and most school districts can't attain that. So we're well below, which is wonderful. We personalize and individualize, but can we reorganize to make this a little bit more efficient? I understand Pathways is an exceptional program targeting special education, but when we look at counselors and psychologists, we're looking at the entire population of students as we support them with best practices.
If I can start and then Tracy can finish, let's look specifically at Pathways. Pathways financially basically is a 1.6 allocation. Roughly that program costs us about $200,000. We have 12 students in the program. If you take one of those students out, to be perfectly blunt, and put them in a therapeutic boarding school, that probably will be at least $150,000 to $200,000. So we believe that it's money well spent when you look at the academic return on investment. The other piece to that is, and I was a big advocate for getting rid of the, I'll be perfectly blunt, the subcontracted service, because I was there, I lived it, and I do not think that they were effective. I knew that our people could do the best. The other thing that we have to remember is we want these students, they are our students in the Weston community. We do not want to, for lack of a better word, send them out somewhere. We want them in our community where they will have that kind of support within Weston to be able to do that. But financially, that 1.6, just looking at dollars, is money, quite frankly, well spent, because that $200,000 could be easily tripled if several of those students go on an outplacement basis. Tracy, do you want to speak to the other thing about the restructuring?
Lisa, I agree with you about Pathways, uh, because I 100% agree. It's least restrictive environment. It's best for the students to be within, the school population. And with that said, we still have very small caseloads for the rest of our
Well,
students.
we have small caseloads, I suppose, if you compare it with the state. But again, I'll go back to our vision. We want to be the standard. And when you look at Westport and you look at Wilton and New Canaan and Darien, they have similar caseloads. So I would not compare ourselves to the state average because we pride ourselves on the level of personalization. I think it's a slippery slope when you look at 250 students and the other Durgays, we look at them all the time. They don't have those kinds of ratios. Tracy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the question seems to be centering around the counselor caseload at the high school specifically, and I can echo what Lisa, superintendent, just said. Lisa, I hear your point about statewide average, but I do think that number is extremely misleading. In many and most other districts, counselors are providing support around schedule development and course selection. They are not providing the level of individualized, personalized support to students and families that we as an administrative team expect of them, and also that students and families in Weston expect of them. That will be lost in any sort of restructuring that would potentially need to happen at the high school level if we had one fewer counselor. Our counselors do provide social emotional support to students. They serve honestly as kind of liaisons between families, teachers. Um, Anytime there is any sort of concern, that's a family's first point of contact. That counselor is involved in meetings with school teams to try to problem solve and make plans for students, again, not just those who are receiving any sort of plan. They're also connected to the PACT program, which is organized by counselor at this point so that the counselors have an opportunity to, in addition to meeting with students individually, also meet with them in the context of small group. So it's a very different model than what I think is traditionally thought of when we think of school counselors. And again, our model is aligned to how our area districts are providing the support, and our caseloads are not significantly different from those districts.
Can I add to that for a moment too, Lisa? That number of 250 that I believe is the recommended number for the National Association of School Counselors, that's kind of the max, right? And that's really to mitigate schools who are exceeding that number, sometimes by 100 to 150 students. So when we talk about best practice and the number of counselors that represent students, that 250 should be, the maximum. And we are in a position where we have such personalized service. Our counselors know our students, they know their family, they know the siblings, they know their story. And no place was that best exemplified and most evident than on Thursday when we were dealing with our school situation and the way that the counselors were able to step in. They were working with kids, they were working with siblings, they were able to help us identify students, get everyone on buses, and really ensure that we really had safe, effective, and efficient practices, and to do what we did in a really well practiced and honed and personalized way. So I always worry when we talk about that 250 number, because that is really to mitigate schools through budgeting and other systems that have a far higher number. It is not known as a national necessarily best practice.
I think that our support staff does an excellent job. I just was wondering if the small caseloads couldn't be redirected, because when we talk about counselors and social workers, we also have 4 psychologists who do the counseling and testing. So it was just, looking at page 73 and the amount of support staff that we do have, it's wonderful for personalization and individualization and ensuring that we have those social needs met. And with that, um, as we look at our budget, these are support services. Could we refocus and reanalyze how they're given so maybe fewer people could support them?
I think we're saying no. Now, you have a wealth of experience in education. If you have a suggestion, please share it with us. However, I am not going to jeopardize the social emotional well-being of our students to make those case loads higher. I won't do it. I'm sorry. All of the top districts in Connecticut do not have those kinds of caseloads, and that is just somewhere we won't go. Again, I welcome if you have an idea, but we've tried a lot of different things over the years, and this is serious. If kids do not feel comfortable in school, this, they will not learn, and we are not prepared to go there.
Lisa, I have to apologize because my connection dropped off, and it dropped off just at the part that I was really kind of hoping for. And Tracy, it was when you were describing the high school counselors. There are 5 high school counselors in conjunction with a school psychologist and a school social worker. I lost, there was one, I understand that we have 1 school counselor per grade, and we're looking at about 170 students per grade. And I think it's a wonderful approach for us to have a school counselor that follows the students for all 4 years while they're at the high school, builds a relationship with them, with their families. I really appreciate that. I like that. I think you guys are doing a great job. I did not understand, and this is again because my connection died, what is the role of the 5th social, or not social worker, the 5th school counselor? Can somebody explain that to me, please?
So can I just clarify, our school counselors at the high school are not assigned by grade level. I made that comment for the middle school. You are correct, though, that the school counselors do follow students for all 4 years. There are 5 school counselors at the high school. I explained that one of those counselors has a reduced counseling caseload because she serves as the director of guidance. She has a lot of responsibility overseeing our programming in general. You might remember that we did a curriculum revision last year or the year before. She's done a lot of work with the technology that we're using in the district and how we support students in the college planning process. So maybe that answers your question. That's how her responsibility differs from others.
It's also, if I can draw attention again to the document that we provided you on Friday. It's spelled out in a chart and all the information is there for all of these positions.
I guess what I didn't see was the fifth, what Tracy just explained. I saw what school counselors do, don't get me wrong, but to have a fifth person who is responsible for basically running the department, it sounds like, and acting as a liaison to different departments was something that I didn't get out of the chart. So, okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm happy to jump in at this point. My concern is the spend, the percentage increase. I mean, that's really just sort of the bottom line. I've said for years, I feel like we're on a unsustainable trajectory, and I feel like the fourth, as I said earlier, this is my fifth budget book, and I think that we've hit it this year. And I could be wrong. I'm speaking both from a Board of Ed member's perspective and a taxpayer. And I don't know that, I've said this before, I don't know that I have the expertise with how the district operates to suggest where we are, where there could be better, higher utilization or whatever the case may be. And I think Lisa Luft brought up, the caseload for guidance counselors. I hear what Tracy is saying loud and clear. It's not an area that we should be looking at. It's an area that, while the numbers look low, they provide a level of service that requires that type of caseload. So really, I guess my question is, I think the budget percentage, it's too big. And I think the potential health savings is not really an offset. It's a maybe. So if we take the potential health savings out, we're looking at a 6% plus increase. And if we have to tell the community it is what it is, there's nothing we can do. We, as a Board of Ed and we as administration, have looked under we turned over every stone, looked in every place. It is what it is. I feel like for me individually, that's where I'm at. It's too big of an increase, and we've hit.
And we hear you, David, and I would respectfully ask that we wait till we go through the other presentations. The coupon that you said last time about the insurance, that's real money, okay? And when I go through the cuts, we've got it down to a 3.0 budget. But I think it would be helpful for Julie now to present about the profile of the district staff, because the only way you're going to get to significant cuts is district staff. It's not going to be these other things. And we're pretty much where we feel comfortable going. Julie, can
I just ask one more question, going back to what Sharon said? So one of the counselors supports the entire guidance counselor department, but we have two assistant principals at the high school with under 500 students. The assistant principal doesn't support the guidance counselors and the direction that they go in. You have a special guidance counselor who does that?
It's the director of school counseling. We can get you the job description, but the assistant principals have other responsibilities. As Tracy talked about the numbers of the 504s, they're involved in that. The assistant principals also, several years ago, because I lived it, had to absorb being a student activities director because that position was taken out of the budget. And Dan is shaking his head. Remember, Dan, when we had to take that over? So I don't want people to see that, oh, you have a lot of administrative staff at the high school. They're all kept extremely busy, especially with in the areas of both regular education and special education and working with students in that area. They handle all the 504s. That is a huge amount of people. Tracy, do you have anything to add?
I think I can just maybe add that when we're talking about this, and I know we're very focused on numbers and the kind of quantitative measure of the work that's happening, and I understand why we're focused there. But I also think we need to be thinking about this qualitatively and the change. We've talked in many previous Board of Education meetings about the increased complexity of student need, especially from a mental health standpoint. So, one student now isn't necessarily consistent with the type of student profile that we were working with 6 years ago. The reality is we do have more significant mental health concerns. We have more crisis situations, which, just so you have a flavor and a context, when we have a student in crisis, that could take one of these professionals an entire school day to work through, meaning that they're not able to see other students who also might be struggling with something less significant, and all of that work needs to be pushed to the next day. I mean, Megan spoke about what happened at the high school on Thursday and the hands-on approach that was needed there. There are situations across the high school that happen on a more regular basis, honestly, than I think people think, where individual students need support in order to be able to access their academic instruction. And these are the people doing that work. And I mean, I think you can hear from all of us that I and we have very significant concerns about having to restructure that model.
If I could also just clarify, because I think there may be some misunderstanding when talking about the role of the director of school counseling. Firstly, there are 689 students currently at Weston High School, so I just want to be clear about that. The second is the person who's currently functioning in the role of director of school counseling is a school counselor. She assumes all of the responsibilities that Tracy described under a high school counselor with a reduced caseload. And that reduced caseload is something that allows her to assume the additional responsibilities of that directorship. So I think I just want to be clear that we don't have 4 school counselors and a director of school counseling. We have 5 school counselors, one of which has I'll call it a release or a reduced role in order to accommodate those additional responsibilities.
I ask another question? I know we probably want to move on and then look back at the totality. If we have a crisis, I guess it's a two-part question. So everybody in every profession has an emergency that you can't plan for, right? That's why it's an emergency. And it becomes an all hands on deck when you have an emergency. So logistically speaking, I have two questions. Logistically speaking, do we have on a regular, consistent basis these types of situations where there's a student in crisis and it causes the other 4 counselors, it takes that one counselor offline and the other 4 can't pick up their workload for the next day or two? Is that a common occurrence?
There are students in our programs that present with a range of needs on a regular basis. So when you're talking about a crisis situation, there's a range in what I'm describing that could be occurring in that. But when a student is experiencing any sort of emotional dysregulation, and it could be for a number of reasons, yes, potentially that mental health provider who is most closely connected to that student, whether it be a school counselor, a social worker, or a school psychologist, are with that student for an extended period of time during the day. And yes, sometimes other people provide support in those moments, but also there are occasions where some of what they would be doing then needs to be pushed to the next day. I mean, that's the reality of the work. I think these are the providers in our district who are most impacted by those kind of unpredictable situations. It could be a peer conflict. It could be an issue that they're dealing with at home, but it is so pronounced that they're having a hard time attending in whatever classroom they're supposed to be in. It could be an issue that they're having in a particular class. Or it could be a social emotional challenge that isn't necessarily directly linked to one specific thing, but is instead a combination of factors that are leading them to have difficulty participating in the school day. And yeah, I think those things do happen frequently across our buildings. And I think that those needs are most pronounced at the middle school and high school, where there is more intense pressure and expectation and responsibilities for students who are trying to assume, becoming young adults and becoming more independent, and navigating many more facets to life than our Hurlbut Elementary School students, for example.
And and I'll wrap it up on this topic. And are we not able to, if we have a student in crisis and we have a counselor offline or a social worker offline, are the are the middle school guidance counselors able to come up? Is that allowed from a I'm not sure what the right word would be, but are they trained to come up and backfill for the day from the middle school?
David, I think when we're talking about these situations, there's a cost to each move and each decision, right? So every counselor has their schedule today. Every counselor has their family meetings, their scheduling meetings, their just general counseling meetings where they might have on a student's plan one-time weekly counseling. So every time we do work together, there are times that we will make a phone call, but I think just we're talking about the needs of kids and, the staff that we have that is working for the current population of students that we have. We also see periodically throughout a school year, there are times that we see heightened levels of emergency or crisis situations with students. So we will always work together. We have worked across buildings. Depending on the extent of a crisis situation, we can certainly work together. But to believe that middle school counselors are going to come to the high school, that's just not the reality of the day, because those middle school counselors have their schedules and their meetings as well.
Okay. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but I'm just going to kind of link it to my world and Dan's world, Dan DeVito's world. We walk into crises all the time because at the end of the day, we're plumbers. We just happen to be working with computers. And I feel like part of our job is to look at where we can reposition staff to deal with the crisis. Now we're dealing with technology. We're not necessarily dealing with a student who's in crisis. So my questions really are, they circle back to, I think we're on an unsustainable trajectory. This seemed to be an area that's out of my area of expertise, but there was the appearance that the number of people providing the services compared to the number of students consuming the services strictly on an enrollment perspective looked skewed. And I think what I'm taking away is these positions are absolutely critical. We need them. We need them at the staffing levels they are. Okay.
Thank you. Without
I
further ado,
actually I want to support David on that too. I totally think that it's not that we are suggesting by any stretch of imagination that the mental health
Sharon, we lost you.
I just think that we need to
I think it's an important conversation. I think it's important to put it out there because it's also, part of this discussion is for the public to hear. People see numbers and they think that we can do different things. I've been here a long time. I've seen a lot of different combinations. This works. It works. And there will be unintended consequences that will adversely affect the district if we tamper with these numbers. I'm being really just blunt. I think this is a good segue to Julie to talk about, to give a little bit of perspective. I know because it's important to understand the profile of the district staff and kind of where we are right now and everything else. Because when you talk about sustaining programs or not sustaining, programs and that kind of things and funding, I think it's important to have this background. Julie, if you will.
Thank you. So Thank you, Tracy, for those details. And I think that that conversation plays into what I'm hoping to speak to you about this morning. There have been a number of questions that have come up relating to the nature of the work of our staff and the impact of any staffing changes that we have proposed. So I'd like to just give you an overview of the makeup of our staff, because sometimes I think, as I've said in previous meetings, the language that we use might be misleading when we talk about certain groups of staff members. And I'd also like to provide some explanation of the considerations that we have in the face of staffing reductions. So currently in Weston, we employ 381 staff members, 89% of which are student facing, meaning they have direct interaction with students on a regular basis, 89%. The biggest groups within that student-facing group include our teacher group and our para-educator group. And when I use the term teacher, I want to underscore that that includes not only classroom teachers, but also interventionists, media specialists, counselors, social workers, psychologists, speech and language professionals, and also our curriculum instructional leaders. That group represents 58% of our total staff. Our para-educator group is the next largest group of staff members, and they represent 16% of our total staff. That student-facing group includes those two groups, teachers and para-educators, as well as our school administrators, our security specialists, school nurses, the administrative assistants who staff these school offices, our permanent substitute pool, lunch and recess aides, providers like occupational and physical therapists and BCBAs, as well as a vocational specialist. We also contract student-facing staff as daily substitutes on an as-needed basis and in stipend positions, such as coaches, club advisors, and theater production staff. So all this to say, the vast majority of the people that we employ, we do so because they are in routine direct contact with our students providing service. The remaining 11% of our staff are not student-facing on a regular basis, though I would underscore that their daily work ensures the safe and efficient operation of the schools and district. And this group includes our custodial maintenance and ground staff, our IT professionals, our staff in finance and operations, the district administrators, and administrative support assistants. When we plan for our staffing needs, we do so in FTE or full-time equivalency. There have been some questions about this. FTE is a metric that expresses employees' workload in relation to a full-time position. So a 1.0 FTE is a full-time position, etc. A 0.5 is a half-time position. Our initial budget request included both increases and reductions in certain areas based on projected enrollment and student needs, for a net decrease of 5.5 FTE. Those changes are comprised almost exclusively of fractional shifts. For example, there is a projected 0.2 FTE reduction in art district-wide. Reductions have been recommended in our previous proposals within the teacher group, including at the elementary classroom level, in the high school core area, in the district-wide specialist group, and in academic support, as well as in the para-educator group within special education. And again, those proposals are based on the enrollment projections that we have and our best estimation of student needs. Today, we are planning to propose additional staffing reductions, which Lisa is going to detail in just a moment. When we have reductions, there are a variety of considerations that come into play in terms of the impact on the profile of our staff. Procedures relating to reductions in force, we typically call those RIFs, are outlined in the bargaining unit contracts. And we have to abide by these procedures, which, depending on the contract, include consideration of seniority, job classification, tenure status, qualifications and experience, certification, as well as recall rights of any previously reduced employees. Furthermore, we have to account for other circumstances which may arise throughout the spring and summer, such as retirements, resignations, the return of tenured staff members from extended leave, or future leave requests. And this is all to say that the determination of which staff members are affected by a reduction in force is a complex decision. And so just to give you a simple illustrative example, and this is very, very simplified, we're anticipating a reduction of one section of third grade, or a 1.0 FTE from the teacher group. That does not necessarily mean that one of our current third grade teachers will be impacted. Elementary classroom teachers are certified in grade bands. They might be certified to teach K-6 or 1-6 or pre-K through 3. And so it's not as simple as one person in one assignment is the person who is impacted. Let's say we have a retirement of a teacher who's currently working in 5th grade, where the sections are projected to remain the same. In that scenario, a 3rd grade teacher might simply shift to 5th grade as an assignment, or they might shift to 4th grade, and the 4th grade teacher might shift to 5th grade. That's one possible scenario. But let's say that there are no elementary retirements and a teacher must end up being separated. Tenure status is a first consideration. If there are non-tenured teachers in the elementary group, they are impacted first. And then the same kinds of shifts as described in the retirement scenario can proceed. Now, this is an isolated and simple example, and you can already see that there is a domino effect in play. So I ask that you project that scenario into one where there are now multiple fractional reductions in various content areas, and consider that we have staff members who serve in multiple assignments or across multiple buildings, or who hold certification in multiple areas. It can be very challenging, and it is very challenging in this moment, to say exactly what the impact of staffing reductions will mean for the overall profile of our staff. I will say, we have an extremely talented and experienced group of non-tenured teachers, some of whom will be impacted by the proposed reductions. 19% of our teacher group is non-tenured. Furthermore, given the fractional reductions that have been proposed, we can expect that there may be more part-time assignments available and or more shared assignments or people working across buildings. These circumstances can present challenges because part-time positions are generally less desirable for applicants or even for our current staff, and shared positions can be very difficult to schedule. Some of the reductions will also have an impact that extends beyond personnel, truly affecting our ability to deliver existing programming to the same level. We will, of course, continue to do our best to provide the highest quality educational experience for our students, but I hope that this explanation and this short example has provided some insight into the intricacies of staffing, particularly within a small district like ours. So I'm happy to answer your questions, and I know I'm just going to underscore again that Lisa has some additional reductions that she would like to discuss this morning.
Hey, Julie, thanks for that. I appreciate it. Question for you all, and I'm feeling a little under the weather, so I'll try to make this short. Would love, Lisa, at the end of this, and it sounds like you're going to tee this up, you're going to go through the proposed reductions and sort of take us through how you got there, what this actually impacts in terms of the paras and the software and everything else that you're proposing here. To your point, Julie, and I'd love to know also, Lisa, how many actual full-time employees this proposed reduction encapsulates. It feels like it's a lot of like 0.2 here, 0.2 there. There may be one reduction of one para to from 4 to 3. So maybe there's a reduction of one head count. I know that in reality, it may be more just because of you're taking 0.5s and 0.2s, but from a head count perspective, I'd love to know what that actual reduction is. Julie, before we get there, Julie, when you're talking about all these considerations, I get it, right? You are reducing potentially people's hours. And so then what are you are doing is you're impacting sort of their schedules and their lives, and that has knock-on effects for what they're doing, right? They go from full-time to part-time all of a sudden, and then they have to recalibrate for their own lives and their own situations. Is it not easier, Julie, then when you're looking at this stuff to say, well, it's just a cleaner way to go ahead and just reduce the number of heads directly, as opposed to taking a 0.2, a 0.5, disrupting a lot of people's lives. And in the course of that, of course, potentially having those people leave later on because they just can't, let's say, sustain, let's say a part-time position, or it doesn't work for them for some reason. So would love your view on that. And then I know, Lisa, you're gonna go over the proposed reductions here. Would love to just understand how many FTEs we're actually talking about here.
Why don't I start, and then we can go back to that question and give Julie a time to look at the stuff. Thank you, Michael. Sorry you're under the weather. Glad it's remote. So I want to take the opportunity to talk about like sort of the story behind the numbers, if you will. So if you look on page 9 of the 1725 budget, I think it was David that wanted, or someone requested, what was the total number of staff? And so right now we have a number of staff, and then we have the what we had before. And yes, there were roughly 300 less students. But I think one of the things that we have to really think about is over the years, well, as long as I've been here, we have really tried to maximize staffing in a way that works both for the individual in the district as well as the program. And when you look at academic return on investment and the best way to piece these things together, I just kind of want to give you a little bit of a history, both for non-certified positions and certified positions of how it's worked and when it's worked well. Back in 1991, when there were very few children at the high school, I think it was about 300, I, along with 14 other people, were shared staff. And so that meant School Road, we were joking around, in those days we didn't use the golf carts, about how we could really use them, because what happens with shared positions, and if they're full-time people, right, but they're shared, you have that you're really not owned by any school. You kind of, go to the high school, do a couple classes, and then go down to the elementary school. So right there, culturally, when you get into the high numbers, like that was a lot of people doing that, 14. Also, when you're shared staff, you get reduced duties, if duties at all, if it can be arranged. So then you have the unintended consequence of just basic duties, how you're going to cover them. On top of that, it's very different when you have a shared person between secondary and elementary. And frankly, I learned about that when I became superintendent, because with an elementary person, for example, you can say you can work Tuesdays and Thursdays and make it work. You're a really great qualified person, or Tuesdays and Fridays, and we can make that work. And they spend all day. Secondary, it's very difficult to do that. You have to do a morning rotation. You have to do an afternoon rotation to make it work. So then you get into that. Again, we're always looking for the most qualified people, but it can be a challenge. If you go and look back at the WMS teaming model, Mr. Doak showed what happens, especially at the middle school, when you only have morning and afternoon, but it happens at the high school too. I'll give you an example. It's very common in world language to have shared staff. I was a world language teacher. And we were really struggling a few years ago with how do we fill these classes? How do we find the level of quality that matches someone's personal life? And I went back to 40 years ago when I taught with someone at Darien High. I knew she retired and I said, hi, you're probably the best person that can teach both Spanish and French that I've ever met. Would you like to come and do it for us? And lo and behold, she agreed, and she's been doing it for us. She likes doing it in the middle of the day. Like, it works great, but that's really, really hard to find. I want to give you a flavor of how in this current budget and in recent budgets, and especially the staffing is challenging when you look at high school staffing, because you're right, Michael, it's often pieces. So you have, for example, we have historically and even now combined different levels of a language. For example, Latin 4 AP is together, French and French AP, they're together because the teacher can differentiate. The numbers are such, it's a higher level of the language, and we want to make sure that those children get that level. We offer courses every other year. AP Chem is offered every other year. Courses like Facing History and Ourselves with American Tapestry, we want to be able to offer the program, and we offer it every other year. So if a student wanted to take AP Chem junior year, we knew that he or she needed it. Maybe it's junior, maybe it's senior, but we make sure that that FTE is available. That course is available when that student needs it. We have classes combined like AP Studio Art and Studio Art. They're combined right now. And we differentiate within that, and it seems to be able to work. So those are some examples of how we work with combining staff. And there's another example, I'll get to it when I talk about the reductions, but for example, the Talented and Gifted program at the middle school is delivered by the library media specialist. It's a small portion of his position. We do not have to, and that was done a few years ago under my watch, we do not have to hire, like who are you going to hire? How are you going to get an elementary school person and a middle school person, mesh the schedules together, figure it all out, and deliver a quality program? And we think that that's working, and more to follow about that reduction, because I think people see it and say, oh no, we have a solution. When you look at other people that perhaps don't necessarily where the rubber meets the road in the classroom. Let's look, for example, at grounds. So you have grounds. I've been here when we've cut the grounds person, and I alluded to overtime. Not only overtime, but we had to bring in subcontractors to be able to work on the baseball field and everything else. So you're literally taking a pot and putting it somewhere else, like the money is going to different places. Same thing with pathways. You have a 1.6 allocation. Before, you would see that money in outplacements, and the money was more. So we're trying to make sure that that doesn't happen. At one point, in recent years, we didn't have an HR director. It was decided that the HR director would be eliminated. When I came on board, I saw this as an untenable situation with an assistant superintendent doing 70% of HR along with the lawyer, along with the superintendent. We need a qualified HR director. Same thing with safety and security. We've gone through all kinds of, we had more staff, then we reduced, then it didn't work, then I wanted to put in the floater. We didn't have a director. We finally got that on the right track, which is what we need. Smaller examples are the things like the student activities. Guess what? You're going to do student activities, AP. APs at the high school. We used to have a person that was dedicated to Power School at the high school that did do all scheduling, all grading. It was a big job. And when you say, well, can the assistant principals help out in PPS? No, because that position was eliminated, and now that's their job to do that. So one of the assistant principals does that work at the high school. There used to be one at the middle school. Guess what? Drew Walters is the person now, the assistant principal. So we really shifted, and that works. Is it ideal? No, but it works, and we can deliver what we need to deliver. So this is all kind of what I would say a flavor. We used to have a finance coordinator, and Phil Cross said, you know what? We're going to give up the finance coordinator. Our group will take on those added responsibilities. Been a real challenge for Phil Cross and company. And I worry about it, especially with different projects that are coming up. He does operations, he does transportation. We used to have a transportation director. I don't think we need one, but he does that, but he gave up the finance coordinator. You know, there are layers and unintended consequences when you look overall at moving staff and what can happen and what can't happen. We really tried the very best we can to make sure that every single person matters. When you go back and you look 8 or 9 years ago, no pathways program. You look at it, no extensive security. You look at the things that we didn't have that we have, and we've been able to offer courses like AP Computer Science every other year to make sure that the program stands. The easiest when you get to a one person, it's going to be in Patty and Laura's school. That's the easiest. Or in a social studies teacher or the core academics at the middle school or at the high school. That's the easiest way to get to that one person. Unfortunately, when you're looking at some of the cuts that historically we've had, especially at the high school, and Julie can speak to these little pieces, then we have to figure out, and it's frustrating because some of these people are top-notch new employees that, oh, great, now, you know, we're going to lose down to a 0.3, you know, you're losing 30% of your salary. Do you still want to work here? That becomes frustrating. Unfortunately, that's been the case for years, and we just have to really mitigate the challenges. I think I'd like to
Lisa,
take
in that case, just really quickly, in that
Sure,
case, if you're reducing 0.2, 0.3, you're still providing benefits, right? So
It depends.
whereas let's say the way just I'm thinking about it is
Mhm.
if it worked and you got rid of, let's say, one full-time employee, you actually get rid of obviously the salary and the benefits. If you're reducing 0.2s and 0.3s, you may come to the same salary equivalent, but you're not getting potentially rid of the benefits. So there is that added cost if
Yes.
you do it that way. Okay.
You're absolutely right, Michael. And Phil and I have mitigated that. Like when you look at a couple of these, you say, well, how did you get to that number? We know it's a specific person. We know it involves benefits, and that's how we can get to that number. So you're right. You have to look at all of it and kind of figure it out and take that into consideration. You know, you can have a certain number you put in for a placeholder, but that's where, what's the term, Phil? Cost savings, is that
Turnover
it?
savings.
What is the term, Phil, that you use when we hire someone different? What's the
Turnover
term?
savings. Turnover savings.
Turnover savings. Thank you. Turnover savings. But it's a fine line, and you really have to analyze it. And we get in the weeds with looking at this. Julie, can you talk? Did you have time to look at the specific breakdown? Can you share that before I go over the reduction list?
Yeah, so Michael, just to go back to your question, I think Lisa just provided some color. But to the question of, is it easier to reduce headcount? Yes, operationally and from a budget perspective, it is easier to reduce headcount. However, it's not instructionally necessarily better to do things that way, right? Like our first consideration is programmatically, are we able to deliver the quality instruction that we need to for the student group that we need to and their needs? And I think that's why you see reflected in the proposal these fractional changes. To your question about how many people are we talking about, how many full-time positions are we talking about? There are 4 in the initial request. Lisa is going to talk about 1 additional. But that, again, doesn't necessarily mean that there are 5 people who will no longer have positions in the schools, because we have people who are already employed at a part-time level. And so those fractional reductions could result in elimination of those part-time positions as well, which my rough estimate looks like impacting the positions for 7 people total. But again, that can be offset when we receive resignations, retirements, things like that. So again, it's complicated. I hope that gives you a sense of what we're looking at. But to Lisa's point, we always try and look at these things in terms of how we can implement the program with the most efficiency maintaining our high quality staff. And to your question about benefits, we offer benefits if someone is working for us at a 0.5 FTE or above.
Right, right. Yeah, there's a difference. I get it. There's a difference between heads that you count, right? So head count, and full-time FTE equivalents, right? Which could look similar. However, you're just basically taking, again, 0.2s and 0.5s. You may not be reducing benefits at all, actually, in that case. And it may not even be those people. So I get all of that. It's you know, it's the carousel of sort of trying to figure out what exactly is going to minimize the disruption, right, to the teaching, sort of to the instruction that we deliver, and the support we deliver. I get that. So if you guys can just go over then what the proposed reductions here are, that would be great. Just and Lisa, I just want to understand why these. So what the net effect is, why these, how did you come to that decision? Just as you go through.
Sure. So we look at the overall program, the impact of the overall program, the number of students that you know, are involved in the program. And, you know, it's really a challenging process, because every principal wants his or her item off the list. I'll say that up front. So I guess you could say that the buck stops with me when I put it on the list. And
I mean, Lisa, let's be clear. No one really wants to be
yeah,
where we
exactly.
are, right? No one wants to be here. We as board members, and I don't want to speak necessarily for everyone, but I know I don't want to necessarily be the one here coming in and cramming down, let's say, in the administration to generate cost savings here. We just want to make sure that obviously we minimize any disruption, but that we're on a sustainable path. So we're relying on you guys, obviously, to tell us how best we can achieve that. And so that's why I'm just trying to understand, you know, why you think you can reduce, you know, by one para and not two, and just so on and so forth.
Sure. I'm happy to go through the list. I will start, you know, at the top and work our way down. It was just put on. It wasn't like in order of anything, to just say up front. So we put in instructional paraprofessional. There currently are 4 regular education paraprofessionals, 2 at each elementary school. That's not counting the special education paras that are there, and the ones that work in the classrooms in that capacity. Okay, an instructional para is you have a para in the library, and then you have paras that help with general ed classes, pushing in math, language arts, helping to get the science labs up and running, things like that. So and this has been a second cut to this. So we had 4, and I'm sure that Patty and Laura didn't want to put the 1 on the list. But we do believe that by reducing by 1, each building will have 1, and then there will be a 3rd person. And that 3rd person, I would leave to the principals of those schools to use that 3rd person as they see fit, whether it be, like we talked about, what kind of a split that would look like, if it would be a split by day, if it would be a split by time of day, if it would be a split by week, for example. If something was going on in Patty's science lab that they have, or Laura's lab, and they said they work together and say, you know, we really need this schedule this time. Contractually, it works well because they're on the same start and end time, so there's no problem with that. You know, they also do sometimes help cover classes, so we're going to have to really work on getting substitutes to, you know, our substitutes to come in. But we believe that while not ideal, that is something that we can put on the table. It requires much more of a flexibility than, oh, I'm the math para, or I'm the language arts para, I'm the science para. It's, I'm an instructional para. And, you know, it will require both administrations to work together to see how, you know, they have the one in their building, how they're going to work, but how would they share a separate person? The next one on the list is to eliminate 0.4 of world language, Chinese 0.2 and Spanish 0.2. Again, we look at the overall program. So currently We have 10 students in Chinese 3. Chinese, much to my dismay of having started the sister school back in 2005, the enrollments have been declining. There is not the interest in it. Right now, we have 10 students in Chinese 3, 10 going to Chinese 4. 10 going to Chinese 4 as seniors, if they so choose that language. They have what I would say is a robust 3 levels. You know, we talked to Randy Green about how this also implicates and looks on a college transcript. They have 3 levels of world language. It's going to be very hard to hire, quite frankly, a person that can teach 1 section of Chinese 4 for maximum 10 students. And whenever you schedule them, you're probably really looking at 8 because there'll be other conflicts, maybe 7. So that was a decision that, you know, we made. The program is sunsetting, and that's why we put it on the table. With regards to point 2 in Spanish, again, that is at the high school. And in looking at it, it's particularly about the Spanish 4 course level. Although, remember, if there's a need and, you know, it shakes out a different way within the Spanish, it could be a different level of Spanish. Right now, we have 2 sections of Spanish 4, 2 sections of Spanish 4 honors. And, you know, I used to do the scheduling. I've looked at these numbers. It's where the students fall. We believe that we can have 3 sections, not 4, and still be able to accommodate those students in both of those levels. Because you never know. Someone might be in Spanish 4, for example, and they might be taking Spanish 4 honors their sophomore year at the same time where they're teaching chemistry honors. And that might be that, you know what, I want to go to Spanish 4 regular. I don't want to do the Spanish 4 honors. So there's fluctuations between those two, you know, you have a level, but then there's fluctuations between honors and standard. So we can comfortably do that. And when you look at people, again, we have someone that has been teaching us, helping us teach the course. She's a part-time retired person. So you take all of this into consideration. Can the kids get the program? Yes, they can get the program, and that won't be affected. Eliminate project challenge 0.5 FTE. Perhaps eliminate is the wrong word. I want to take a moment to, it's the FTE, not the program. And I want to take a little bit of time to talk about that. So we have Project Challenge, and Tracy, please jump in. Why don't you explain our responsibilities and the numbers in the program, and then I'll talk about a way that we think we can still be meeting the needs of those students. Tracy?
Yes. So our Project Challenge program serves students who have been identified as gifted and challenged. As gifted and talented, I'm sorry. And our responsibility in Connecticut is to identify students who would qualify for those services, but not necessarily actually provide services. So we have solely an identification responsibility. Who meets the criteria of gifted and talented? In Weston, for a long time, we have taken that responsibility one step further and provided support to students. Patty, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are approximately 20 students in grades 3 through 5 who are currently being supported by that program.
Yes, about that. Yes.
So that's the context, really.
So at the middle school, Dan, can you paint the picture at the middle school, please?
Yeah. So we have a few more students than that in our school because the students are reevaluated in 5th grade to see if anybody else qualifies to be identified. And then any students that are new to Weston also get assessed each year. We have currently around 35, 36 students in our 4 grades. So we have 4 sections of Project Challenge here at the middle school.
Can you talk about the culminating experience or whatever, what these students do, Dan?
Yeah, so their main culminating experience is their master project that they work on. It's an individual project of high interest to the student, and they work on that for quite a bit of the time, especially in the second half of the year, and it culminates in a fair that we have here at the middle school, where each student is presenting their project and their learning to the school community and to the parents.
And how are we delivering that program now with the FTE that we have?
So we did have to get creative a few years back when we were looking to make some budget cuts, and we folded that into the duties and responsibilities of our library media specialist, which did seem like a really good fit because that's where the library media specialist can really assist students in their research and their exploration.
And Patty, can you speak a little bit to the intermediate school program? I believe there's another culminating experience. I think I attended it last year.
Yeah, so similar to what Dan shared in middle school, our students, they spend part of their day working in a classroom on a grade level learning, and then the majority is done focusing on this master project that they work on individually, or they could be working with a classmate, and then it culminates in the spring in a Maker Tech a project challenge fair. And those master projects are purely based on their individual interests and what they want to learn more about or study.
So when we say the 0.5, the 0.5 actually is an FTE that is allotted at Weston Intermediate School. Patty, can you talk about, we have discussed internally, and Dr. Henkel, feel free to join in. Basically, we're looking at students that find a passion in an area. It could be in a variety of things. I remember seeing one last year that had to do with science, and creating a research project around that area and then presenting it at both schools. Patty, why don't you start, and then maybe Dr. Henkel can fill in what we talked about how we can not eliminate the FTE, but still deliver the program.
Right. So when we're talking about it, we're looking at a potential staffing cut, not a program cut. I don't want to lose the program per se, but it's looking at how we can still have that program for our students. Maybe it may look a little bit differently, but still being able to ensure that experience for our kids. We haven't fleshed it all out, but I really believe that we can make that happen with our current levels of staffing.
Which includes the library media specialist,
Right.
correct, a piece, and we have a current FTE that we think it will work. Tina, can you add some color there?
Yes.
Sure. You kind of started. The idea around curriculum enhancement and enrichment is really most connected to a library media specialist curriculum around digital literacy, technology integration, and problem solving and critical thinking. So as Dan mentioned, it weaves really nicely in alignment to the library media specialist curriculum and supporting on how to enhance any content area that they're very skilled in their expertise in. So at the intermediate school, we have approximately, like Tracy and Patty mentioned, between 20 and 24 students that we've identified. And given the fact that we currently create opportunities for all students at the intermediate school through the digital literacy and digital citizenship curriculum that our library media specialist utilizes, we believe that we can consider looking at schedule changes or look at ways to enhance the current program through the library media specialist curriculum and see how we can still allow for project-based learning through critical thinking, passion projects, Genius Hour, to support Project Challenge curriculum and support those 24 students per se through the library media specialist position. It would require different scheduling. It would require us having a conversation around different ways that intermediate school currently enhances the curriculum through the library media specialist curriculum first, and see where we can allocate time and think about how to still provide some enrichment experiences for students that are identified.
Okay, so I think when people see the list, they say, oh my God, you're getting rid of the program. We're really not. We're doing kind of what we did at the middle school. And again, it goes back to looking very specifically at what people are doing. The next request is to reduce textbooks by $25,000. There was a reduction. We often, quite frankly, do this, and we go and we look and we see, is it a want, is it a need? To be determined. That's still in negotiations with the principals where, but we feel comfortable that we can reduce it by $25,000. So that was the next piece. Again, these are very small pieces. The next one is the WHS cheerleading program, and low participation is cited. Now, the next two, the drama and the cheerleading program, I'll be frank with you, it's a 0.07, not really a lot. Okay, we can certainly, if you're saying these are important programs, we don't want to put them in, I get it. But when you look at, and again, you say, well, why did it make the list? Well, it made the list because first of all, there's no winter cheerleading right now at the high school. There weren't enough students to carry the program. It was, I believe, less than 10. I don't want to speak the number. So we don't have it. Fall, we have, you can see that there are many, many children at the lower levels that absolutely adore and love cheerleading. What we do find out is, you know, because cheerleading is a sport, when they get to the high school, many of them choose to play a winter sport instead of doing winter cheerleading. Sports like ski team, sports like basketball, those sports. So that's why we felt comfortable with putting it on the list. It's a nominal amount, but you might say, well, why did you then? Well, quite frankly, if I'm not going to run an AP Chem class or only do it every other year for the same number of students, I do think it's appropriate that we put it on the list and we consider it in looking at everything. Will $15,000 really break the budget? Clearly not. The next, again, talks about the fall drama program. This is not, this is looking at one production within a drama program and looking at it through the lens of, if you look at the drama or you look at the other schools do one big production, then perhaps this is something that we need to consider at the high school. Remember, there are productions that have stipends associated with them. And there is also a company advisor, and that the students do other types of performances that are not necessarily tied to a big production, like whether it be fall or spring, that could still continue. And in fact, from the spring could be moved to the fall. Patty, I'm going to ask Patty Fauber to speak a little bit to this because, you know, for those of you that don't know, that was Patty's background before she came with us. And then she has always enriched that background. So Patty, can you talk a little bit about that for us?
I mean, sure, a lot of schools will do like a 1 year it's a drama, 1 year it's a musical. They could rotate that way. There's other ways they can do student-led performances, sort of the dialogues they have with the dialogue performances, move those into the fall instead of having 2 productions in the spring. Those are more student-led productions with your company advisor overseeing that. There's lots of creative ways that that you could draw maybe even more students in to have that drama experience. They used to have an improv group years ago at the high school. I remember when they had that again, and that was company led and more student led, but the company advisor sort of oversaw that. So there are some creative ways of making sure that they don't lose that piece of the program.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember that improv group, as a matter of fact, and it was done through the company advisor. It wasn't a separate stipend. You know, these productions cost about, 24 grand to put on with all the positions. Again, it's a point, what is it? 0.04. So that brings us down to, but how did we get to it? Enrollment, looking at overall program, trying to be creative, looking for ways that won't detract from the program. But perhaps we can shift some things around, and even oftentimes these are opportunities to revitalize other areas that may have been, you know, done in the past that could resurface again with that. Software, Dan DeVito, I'm going to ask you to speak to this. We can't hear you, Dan DeVito.
Okay. So yeah, when it comes to software, every single year we look at redundancies and efficiencies, and we're pretty confident that there's some software programs that we can sunset without negatively impacting curriculum instruction. So we're going to be, it's to be determined because we have a couple in mind, and we're going to evaluate and see which the best option is.
But you feel comfortable, Dan, with that number?
Yes.
Okay. So that's kind of it. I hope I gave you enough flavor of where we're going. So right now, with those reductions, you know, it's a 0.42 reduction, which gets us to a 3%, which is, I think, a very respectable number. I think there is a reality here to go under 3%, and you want more sustainability, you're going to be cutting staff and adversely affecting the overall experience of the Weston Public Schools. That's the charge, that's the charge. But we feel comfortable. This budget has a 7.4 reduction of FTE. 7.4. That I think is significant. I think that, you know, does anybody else have any questions about the items on the list? If not, we can go on to the technology, teaching and learning.
Lisa,
go ahead, David.
Sorry, I cut somebody off. Is that you, Chad?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a quick question, Lisa. Actually, it might have been Julie, you said this. I just want to understand a little bit better the tenure piece. I think reading between the lines, what you're saying is that we have, I think it was 18 or 19% of our staff is non-tenured. There's quite a bit of our staff that is quite good, even though they don't have their tenure yet. And if we were to do cuts, it is last in, first out. So we would lose potentially quite a few really good non-tenured teachers. Does that sort of encapsulate one of the themes of what you were saying, Julie?
It does. I just want to be clear. It's not exactly last in, first out. The non-tenured staff is considered as a group of people who are qualified for a certain position. And ultimately, within that group, it is the superintendent's decision. It's not necessarily a matter of you were hired 2 days before I was, and therefore I'm the one that's out. So it can be a little bit complex, but yes, the long and the short of it is we are talking about people who came to us, many of whom with prior experience, as is articulated in some of the documents that were provided for you today. And just because they are not tenured yet in our district, they would be part of that group.
Okay.
If I can add, I'm sorry, if I can just add about the non-tenured, we take that responsibility very seriously. Full disclosure, I was a Spanish teacher at Darien High, and I lost my job because of declining enrollments. Look, I ended up in Weston, but I remember how that, and I wasn't the first choice. I remember how that felt. And we are very, very committed to this staff. We spend so much time hiring great staff. And, you know, for example, people have to let us know if they're going to come back from child rearing. I go so far as to, if I know the person, I'll call them up. Hey, what are you thinking? What's going on? Hey, look, we're not pressuring you. You have to until this certain date, but there are other people that this could impact. It could impact their positions. And anyone that if they have to move on from here for this reason, we are committed to finding them another job and helping them. That's what I experienced in a Durgay district. That's how I ended up in Weston. And that's really important. We value people. We work through it. We look very carefully at what certifications are because nobody wants to be in this position. That being said, it's a reality. And how we respond both ways with the cut and then helping someone that's top-notch find another position, you know, I feel very, very strongly about that.
So yeah, and I agree with you. This is not a position I think any of us want to be in. And if we're not at least having a conversation, we're not really, in my opinion, as a Board of Ed member, I have a fiduciary responsibility to at least have the conversation. So my next related question though is, actually, a two-part question. Tenure only applies, generally speaking, to the folks that are standing in front of the classrooms directly educating our students, right? The support staff. Okay, I see some. Okay, so tenure, does it apply? I'm not picking on the guidance counselors. It's just an easy social workers. Do they have tenure?
Yes. So under Connecticut's teacher tenure law, a teacher is defined both as a classroom teacher, what you're envisioning, but also that group encompasses that pupil services staff that Tracy described this morning, counselors, social workers, psychologists. It also includes certified administrators. all of those people have the ability to achieve tenure within a public school district in Connecticut based on certain provisions related to their level of certification and their previous experience.
Okay, and then my last question related to this is not about pushing out, the senior folks, but they do tend to retire, right? They've worked a long time and they want to move on to stage 2 of their life, which is, where Lisa's going and Patty's going. And as much as we're sad to see you go, when do the conversations generally occur? If, as we're meeting today, we have a staff that's instructing our students right now and counseling our students and doing all these things. If we're going to have retirements in the spring, it's a two-part question, I guess. When do those folks generally let you know, Lisa, or Julie? And do you have proactive conversations with them during budget time like now to help forecast expected retirements?
So I will say you are currently aware through our consent agenda of all of those staff members who have already provided us notice of their intent to retire, and you named them. There are conversations that are happening. I've had requests to meet with certain people who are considering their retirement. It is a significant consideration. There have been some recent changes in terms of Social Security and retirement provisions within the municipal group that have caused some people to think differently about what their options might be. So there are some initial conversations that are happening. I would expect that we will continue to have those conversations over the next several weeks. There is not a hard and fast deadline by which someone needs to provide us notice that they are choosing to retire as of the end of this year. And while I would say we have a responsibility to provide resources and advice to those who are considering their retirement, it is a little bit of a dangerous game to reach out to people preemptively to say, hey, are you thinking about retiring this year? We can provide resources, we can provide information. I'm working actually right now on my monthly newsletter through HR that I send out to people to try and provide information about some of those changes in the laws that we've seen. But no, we do not specifically target certain people who are within a group who might be considering their retirement unless they reach out to us first.
Thanks. That's it from me.
Could
I'll jump
I
in.
respectfully suggest a 5-minute break? We have some members that would like 5 minutes. Right now it's 10:35. Could we come back? We'll say 10:40.
Sure.
Is that okay? Thank you. Okay, if you're back, if you could turn your cameras on so we know that you're ready to go, that would be helpful.
Lisa, can you hear me okay? I'm speaking with a headset. I just want to make sure the sound quality is okay. Let's chat.
It's a little muffled, Chad,
Yeah, it's a
but
little
we can
muffled.
hear you.
No, I'll switch off and not do that.
Yeah, that's better. Lisa, do you want me to jump in or did you want to start?
Lisa, you're muted.
Are we all back and ready to go? Are the principals back? Yeah, it should be noted that today is Holocaust Remembrance Day. So if you see some of our principals jumping on and off, that's because they're making sure that the things are moving smoothly along.
Yeah, just
Tina-
a little plug on that. At our next curriculum subcommittee meeting in February, we will have our curriculum and instruction leader, Shauna Johnson, joining us to give us a synopsis of today's events. We have visitors and presentations at the middle and high school throughout the day today.
Tina, can you hear me better now or not?
Much better, yes.
Okay, good. I'm off video because I have my phone pressed up against my head. Apologies, everyone. I'm having to fly across the country today, so I'll spare you the background of the airport. I'll pitch in my 2 cents on the budget and then just, I guess, let others continue. And then depending on when you want to segue it, I do have tech questions on the technology documents you shared. Lisa, thank you for that. But let me give my 2 cents on the budget first, just to be a bit of a contrarian on this. I actually think, before we pat ourselves too hard on the back about cutting this and cutting that, I don't know that we necessarily want to proceed with everything that's on this list. I'll give you a couple examples. I think the administration has done a heck of a job demonstrating incredible fiscal prudence in terms of trying to suggest some of these, but I don't think we should necessarily say, yes, we should do each of these. And the reason is that we also have to take our administration's advice at face value that they're doing the very best to educate our children and give them an exceptional quality education here in Western Connecticut. People move here for the schools. In many ways, it's the single biggest attraction to this neighborhood. And there is such a thing as getting in a sort of a vicious cycle, a reinforcing thing of where we enforce some sort of forced austerity that then actually ends up degrading the district ever so slightly, which decreases people's willingness and excitement to be in the district, et cetera, et cetera. So as you're going through this laundry list of items, to me, but I think the administration will know better, of course, but to me, some of these things seem like maybe they're fiscally prudent and some seem like a genuinely bad idea. The fall drama program seems to me concerning. Project Challenge definitely seems concerning when you see as much concern about cutting of gifted and talented programs across the country. I know that you're suggesting this is not a cut, but an adaptation. The Chinese language phasing out, perhaps that does seem to make some sense, as does the cheerleading program based on what you said, Lisa. I'm not so convinced about the Spanish, but anyway, my point is simply, before we get too carried away patting ourselves on the back about carving off an extra 15K here or an extra 30K here, the first and foremost question we should be asking ourselves is this good for our kids and is it good for the district? And so I think it is worth asking the question, if to achieve these budget cuts, we're talking about cutting headcount, do we want to cut headcount? So that's my provocative question to throw into this whole equation. You all can do with that what you will. I'm going to listen for a moment. Lisa, did you want to transition now to technology or not?
Yes.
Okay.
So now we have technology and learning. This is document 2, and Dr. Henkel and Mr. DeVito will take us through this, and then at the end we will entertain questions. The stage
Great.
is yours.
Great. Thank you. Good morning. Is it still morning? Yes, it is. Okay. So just to clarify, we have began this technology conversation since our first Board of Ed workshop on January 7th. So there is, this is our third document now that we have provided to you regarding whether it's technology equipment and or the enhancement or use and purpose of technology in the classroom. So specifically the third document that was provided to you on Friday was in response to 3 or 4 broad conversations around technology and intention of technology. The first specifically talks about instructional software tools and how we currently use specific tools throughout the district, not only for students, but also for teachers, so that they have an opportunity to achieve high levels of success and engagement in the classroom. In that response, we went through and tried to paint a very clear picture around different usage and rationale around instructional software, specific instructional pedagogy, and the way in which that we use technology to enhance the learning. Also cited with specific research, which is always how we ground a lot of our pedagogical conversations in education. And so that was the first portion of the response. We also wanted to highlight some of the ways in which we balance the amount or use of screen time and ensure that it is developmentally appropriate. We're not overusing technology. We're not using it as a hindrance. We recognize that, you know, students in a kindergarten level versus students at a senior level are using it differently. And the balance in which we are using the technology is definitely something that we are very mindful of, so that we're using it in moderation and have explicit purpose and intentionality. The third component of that document was focused around brain breaks. We really wanted to lean into that conversation a little bit. It kept coming up. So we had an opportunity to really ask specific questions around brain breaks and movement breaks, whatever topic you want to mention, and the importance of allowing for students to kind of step away and refire their brains before they transition to a new content area specifically. So we added some explicit topics and research around that. And then finally, based on some requests in the field, we involved our staff around some of these same conversations through a survey. To give a full picture, the survey was sent out last Friday. We usually allow about a week for staff to respond. There's a lot going on throughout the district. And so we did have some hiccups in our week's plans, and we wanted to make sure that we gave enough time for staff to respond. We did offer an open-ended response question in our survey, and some of those responses are also included in the document we sent out on Friday. So with that being said, we wanted to make sure people had more time to respond to the survey, and so we did extend that out a little bit further. So the synopsis basically on the last part of this document was really talking about, we asked about 20 questions to our staff, and Julie mentioned earlier, you know, about 90% of our positions in the district are directly related to, you know, interacting with students, directly related to facing students and student instruction. Of the 197 participants that we received in our survey, it represented 83% of our teachers. We are really thankful that the distribution that we gathered across all the different grade bands was pretty equal. So we had about an equal distribution of responses from pre-K to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12. And those 20 questions that we asked ranged from you know, specifically technology usage and the amount of time that we use technology on a given day or a given week. We also talked about usage of homework and at-home technology usage with activities. We talked about the impact of technology on instruction and the given outcomes that the teachers see for students. We also asked specific questions around challenges and barriers. You know, what challenges do you face when you use technology in your classroom? What aspects of instruction are most affected by technology if it were to be removed when it comes to delivering high quality instruction in the classroom? We also talked about, asked questions regarding student engagement and 21st century learning and preparedness in the long term for students as they graduate Weston. We asked specific questions around wellness and brain breaks and how they use technology to provide opportunities for movement-based activities in the classroom, and whether or not they feel that technology helps to facilitate some of those activities throughout the day or the week. And then finally, like I mentioned, we also asked, we gave them the floor. We asked them to, if they had any additional feedback or thoughts about our survey and why we're asking them to engage in that conversation today. And we gave some highlights. We gave some highlights to the open-ended responses. So in general, as we said on the summary, you know, 92.3% of our educators believe that technology is positively enhancing engagement and the experience for students in the classroom. You know, we really feel that this opportunity for teachers to engage in this survey really helped solidify some of what we've been talking about over the last couple meetings with all of you. And now we have some explicit data to back that up, and some also maybe qualitative components that also shed a light on how the teachers and the educators are feeling around this topic as well. So that's kind of the summary of the third document that we've provided to you. I know we have given explicit responses given to the equipment request in the budget, but then also we talked a little bit more about the application, the integration in the classrooms in a previous document as well to this one. Lisa, did you want me to highlight anything else?
No, Mr. DeVito, you spent considerable time looking over the data. Do you have any highlights to add?
Just wanted to make one comment. A bunch of the open-ended responses, as well as some of the questions, did highlight the need for properly functioning technology. The teachers did feel that, you know, one of the biggest downsides is when the Chromebooks in grades 3 through 8 are down just due to their age, it then sets them back a little bit when students have to wait for them to either get a loaner Chromebook or for it to get fully replaced. So that's really all I wanted to touch on.
But it's not just Chromebooks, it's also the other technology, correct? And this gets, quite frankly, at the staffing that you have in your technology department, because we talked about that as well. And how important it is, this just-in-time service. If you can elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, with the district technology staff, they're constantly running around to make sure that everything is fixed as quickly as possible. And it can be difficult at times when you have older equipment, and especially front-facing equipment that needs to be fixed, because we know that it's negatively impacting the education experience. So, you know, and we've also had staff members mention, you know, the fact that they need a smartboard if they have an old piece of equipment or they don't have a smartboard in their classroom. So it did stress the need for the technology equipment as well as the support for the technology equipment.
questions?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. Tino, just to confirm one thing, Dr. Henkel, the document, so I'm making sure I'm looking at the right one. At the end of it, there was the 92% number and then a handful of qualitative responses. That the actual survey was not included, nor was the sort of citation document with the various studies that were referenced in it. Is that right?
So the document in the beginning portion, right, the citations and and the research was provided in a previous document. Well, and there was actual research in the first couple questions before we gave a summary of the technology survey. So we are in the process of itemizing every individual question. As I mentioned, we usually like to give about a week for staff to participate. We had a little bit of a hiccup to our schedule at the end of last week. So we just gave a brief overview and summary of the data that we gathered based on some of those questions.
Gotcha. If it's possible, even if we don't have the final responses and to share the questions before tomorrow, that would be great. The reason being is like I'm happy to see some of the responses from the faculty about how essential they see this, that kind of thing. But not all technology is created equal, meaning brain breaks are different from a Google chart, different than a smartboard, different than something else. So I am curious in terms of where they think there are potential areas that are not so useful. Anyway, I'll sort of give you my whole gist on this, and then I'll just listen so that I don't bother you all with background airport noise. That would be great to see. The brain breaks themselves, I still think we need to look a little more closely at that. Reason being, some of the research you have cited is from 05, 09, 04, 06, things like that. And the idea that a video game, essentially, which is what a lot of brain breaks are, is necessary or even actually does what the research says brain breaks do is dubious, which would be another example of when we could potentially have a cost savings thing. Instead of that software platform, have the teacher lead the hokey pokey or have a student lead a dance maneuver or whatever. And I know in the past we've talked about, there's ableism involved with that, but you could have a student do it. Anyway, my point is like not every single thing within this is necessarily equal. So I think it's worth looking at. But the bigger point really is that if we're talking about staff cuts, which is the first part of this conversation, then I think buying a bunch of new Chromebooks is a silly use of the district's money. I am perfectly happy to be proved wrong by what the faculty say in terms of the essential nature of all this. But if we're actually talking about removing teachers and buying Chromebooks, I think it's a misguided philosophy.
Well, we're talking about two of the teachers that we're taking out from the classroom at intermediate school is strictly deal to enrollment purposes. We would do that regardless of whether we had the technology or not. And I want to be very clear. I have presented this budget to the different faculty during the time when this survey went out. And there was a great deal of chatter amongst them saying, you're going to take away our technology. One person frankly said, I guess I better go look and go work in another district. I'll go to another Durgate district where they value it. So you talk about unintended consequences. That's an unintended consequence as well.
I did also want to bring up the concept that if new equipment, if new Chromebooks were not purchased, that's actually going to increase the downtime because now we'll be on year 6 for those Chromebooks. And if we're not going to be removing them, we're not going to take them out. They're embedded in curriculum instruction. So we do have to factor in the exponential increase in downtime, where if you have a classroom of 20 students and you have 3 Chromebooks that are offline now, and they're either waiting for a replacement or waiting to get a loaner, which we're becoming more and more short on, then those students then suffer from, they can't learn at the same level and speed as everybody else. So I did want to keep everyone into consideration that it's not a yes or no. Not replacing the Chromebooks does then increase the downtime of the existing Chromebooks.
Yeah, well, so Lisa, look, I'm more than happy to be proved wrong on this whole thing. Maybe this next time, if you can't share questions or some more data before tomorrow. If you can't do that, then maybe we can have more of a conversation tomorrow before the vote. But if I'm just wrong about this, then that's great news, because then I'm a lone voice and actually we're using technology really well. And if this just forces us to look a little more closely at some of the, I think, not great uses like brain breaks, et cetera, then great. And if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. And then I will stop wasting everyone's time on this if the faculty really says that this is not just an important, but a deeply essential need. So I'll
Thank
stop
you.
talking now. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And as we, whenever we give student surveys out, we always let parents come in and look at those surveys. We're more than happy to provide you with the survey. We will get it out this afternoon of what the questions look like.
Absolutely.
Is there more to this morning's presentations, Lisa?
Yes, we saved the best for last. Okay, Phil, you're
Hey, so
on.
we're going to talk about, I think we need to have a conversation about the capital budget.
Great, thanks.
Mike?
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me explain a little bit better what we have going on here. So I know there's a little bit of frustration with capital budget and timing of pricing and things like that. The last couple of years, we've taken it upon ourselves because of numbers that came in skewed. So one thing to note is that numbers that we have here, these are direct proposals. These aren't estimates or guesstimates or some sort of engineered ideas. These are actually hard costs with material outlined. So it did take a little bit longer. We're already working on next year's and the following years, so I don't foresee this continuing for another year. But that's what the delay was with some of the costs. It was actual walkthroughs with mechanical contractors, with all the necessary pieces, like electrical companies and fire companies. So these are actual hard costs. So I'll go over a couple of things that the numbers were put in. We have one addition, one move. So the one addition that we have is it's energy management software, hardware upgrade. What we have is we have a sort of beginning to have a licensing issue that began January of this year. We have till about October to do some sort of an upgrade to protect us against any kind of hacking, and also so we can get on with our equipment. Now, I have a Zoom meeting coming in the next few weeks with their IT department and our IT department with Dan. Dan's already been made aware of the project, and he's been working with me hand in hand because I don't really understand the IT side of it. So this is just a number, and we're hoping that these numbers will change. But the $40,000 was put in because that would be the max cost if things stay the way that they are. We had one move. The one move was just because we need to get a little bit more information, and I didn't like the way the project was going. And this was the Weston High School, the front foyer HVAC addition to the area. I got a rough estimate there, which includes all the material and the tradesmen, but I just didn't like the way that it was going, so we pushed this back at least until next year. Well, we have some costs put in for which was our district-wide energy efficiency upgrades for all buildings. And by the way, we do have a walkthrough going right now with our audit company, so we will have a much better idea where we are with this. But the first number was about $75,000 for the LED retrofit. This would just be hardened figure just for lighting, not the HVAC side of it, just lighting upgrades. And we'll get an itemized idea of where we're going to be, a little bit better off in the next few weeks as to what locations we're going to hit, classrooms, and move on from there. Ideally, it will be a little bit of each building, not just focus on one building and move. We have a cost of, where are we? $190,000 for the Weston High School locker room replacement of the heating system, including air conditioning. We have a struggling unit that we're looking to have changed out. Back in 06, when the addition was put on, they tied into the unit to do 2 additional large space rooms. So over the time, the unit's just beginning to fail, and we're having a hard time just keeping up with the heating aspect of it. So now we're looking to just change the rooftop unit and have it a self-contained unit with heating, cooling, fresh air. That was the second cost that we have gotten in. The next one was the Weston Intermediate School VAV box electronics. What this is you have about roughly 80 or so rooms, large space, small spaces, closets, miscellaneous rooms that have their own temperature control. So you have a unit that feeds a certain degree, and then you have a makeup unit in every room, closet, large space to fine tune the temps. It's just such a huge square footage. Rooms are different, east side of the building, north side of the building, west side of the building. So temperatures are different. And when the building was built, this is what that was introduced. So this is the electronic side, so it can be monitored through energy management. That cost, I believe, was 165 roughly, $165,000 for all units. And the one scary the number that everyone is seeing is the elementary school North House HVAC replacement. So this includes an upgrade, replating both plants, the heating side, cooling side. The initial 400 everyone has seen has been, that was just an S&P number back in 17, just to add air conditioning into the spaces, which would just have been in split systems, similar to what we have in the south and east, but it would not have rectified our issues with the unit ventilators that are from the 60s and 70s. So this cost is a like for like unit ventilator. And after we get our analysis done, engineered specs, we could see if we could do any sort of large scale air handler or rooftop unit, but that will all be determined within the next several months. Everything else has remained, but those are the costs that were added with the changes. I don't see anything else on my end. I'm sure you guys have questions, but that's really the whole nutshell that I have for you guys. Oh, I take it back. The PA system, which was line 2. The PA system is for the high school, for middle school, for elementary school. This is the PA, this is the Bell system. This is everything integrated with the systems. And again, today we had the high school go down, which happens every month or so. In every building, we have one of these go down. We have a hard cost. Phase 1 is going to be the 3 schools at $100,000. Next year will be phase 2, changing of the clocks that go with the system. And that is all I have for you guys. I'm sure you have questions, and I'm here.
So in terms of next year's capital budget, not the current fiscal year we're talking about, we're moving how much into next year?
Only one was moved to next year, if I'm understanding your question right, Steve.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that was just the high school unit. For just the addition. When the addition was put on in 06, they removed 2 heating units for makeup heat to allow for the open space. So this was just something to bring those units back, but I didn't like where it was going. So this is the only project that shifted to next year.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. I was waiting to see if anybody else wanted to jump in. I'm still confused year over year why we pay for things like LED audits and replacements when, as a consumer, I can get that done at no cost from Eversource, and I don't read a ton about what schools are eligible for, but I get enough that that I always feel like there are funds set aside for schools to be able to access this type of stuff at no cost. So can you bridge that gap for me, why we pay for that?
Yeah, no, the analysis that we're having done now for the LED retrofit is there is no cost. There's a cost that goes to the company doing it, but it's paid by Eversource. So we haven't spent a dime to move forward with any kind of analysis. If we have to go any deeper, then there could be an associated cost to the buildings. But as this point with our walkthrough and where we're going to get direction, there is no cost out of Weston's pocket.
Okay. And then my other question, which one of our community members brought up at our meeting last week, I don't know the answer to this question myself. So why did Hess HVAC go from 400,000 to north of 1.5 million?
Okay, the initial cost that was put on from S&P back in 2017 was strictly the addition of the split system air conditioners, which are the units that go outside and then the units that sit on the wall. That only takes care of one aspect of our North House issue. That did not include any of the air handlers for the gyms, for the science piece, or any of the classroom unit ventilators. So the 24 somewhat rooms, we have a gymnasium, hallways. So there's a lot more to it than just what S&P had put on for that $400,000 for the addition of air conditioning to the spaces.
Okay, so are we talking about again, layman's terms here, centralized air conditioning for the North House so we get away from those portable units and those window units?
Yeah, it could go either way. We don't know if we have the space for a rooftop unit or an air handler, so to speak, but at least this cost that is associated right now is a like for like with the addition to air conditioning into the unit ventilator, as opposed to the unit ventilators that we have in place now that are strictly just heat.
Okay. A couple of years ago, I walked through Hess with, I want to say it was you, Lisa. I'm not positive, but it was you, right? So, actually, I'm sure, right. And one of the things that we talked about, if I remember correctly, is that there appears to be an enormous cost to maintain these individual window units and portable units. They lend themselves to humidity. We wind up with tiles that get moldy. So it would seem to me like this system in place today is expensive to maintain, but we're thinking about replacing them with similar. Can you clarify that piece?
Well, if we
Let me try and then Mike can jump in. The reality is something needs to be done about the air handling units, and Laura's shaking her head, at North House. Okay. You just have to walk down the second grade class, the whole second grade's there, and 2 classes of first grader on the bottom floor, plus the gym is there. It has to be done. Now, we are also being very cognizant of, there might be other things that we need to do in that building that is extremely old. So how we approach it, because let's face it, I don't think anything will be done any other way for years to come. We've got to be able to do something now to improve it. So I'll turn it over to you, Mike, as to how we're kind of trying to maneuver this that has been neglected.
Mike, before you start, so David, it is not a like for like. This is an addition. We currently only have unit ventilators that provide heating to the space. And what we have right now, to your point, is that we have portable units in some of the classrooms. So this is a brand new system that will address both the heating and cooling, which should address and also ultimately address the humidity issues that we have in that building.
But will it address, and sorry, Mike, then you could answer the question. So I think I do remember correctly from walking the building with Lisa a few years ago, these portable units are thorns in everyone's side, from I understand from the maintenance people to the moisture that they create, to the ability to maintain them, to the damage they do to the ceiling tiles. So my question is more along the lines of, if we're going to spend money, are we spending it right? And even if it means more money, because I'm not suggesting, this might be one of the few times that you hear me say in this budget we should spend more. But we should be doing things right. So my question is, are we expanding on a system we know is not good, or can you just explain that for the 1.5 or so?
Yeah, we're trying to upgrade. So we're going to issue an RFP with a request to design of the system for the North House. We just don't know if we have the room for ductwork, which would be if it was a rooftop unit or an air handler for different rooms or different spaces, so be it. But the cost that is generated is a unit ventilator with cooling integrated into it, which would allow also fresh air, heating and cooling to maintain the space. Those portable units would be gone, and it would just be the units on the wall. Ideally, unit ventilators will not be put back in, and we will have a centralized system, whether it's 2 or 3 units. We just don't know before we issue or get the response back for the request for design if we have the capabilities of putting a large scale HVAC unit in with ductwork to feed and supply air, heating, fresh air to the spaces.
So this is more like a budget placeholder, so to speak, because we know we need to do something. I've heard this year over year, and will this come back to us as a board to approve the expenditure because of the dollar amount, or just by approving it in the budget that gives you the ability to pick what you perceive to be the best option and proceed with that?
we'll see where we are when we get the request for design back. Ideally, we'll be in a much better place, and they'll surprise us with an upgraded system that we could put in as opposed to what we're doing. But I'm sure something with this cost and magnitude, I'm sure would be discussed.
And what's the timing of all that?
We should have within the next few months the design built as to what we can do to upgrade the North House HVAC system.
So we really won't know for
We're probably
end of the school year?
End of the school year, and then we can start moving forward to how we're going to do it for the next fiscal year. That's correct.
And then, so on that comment, if this is going to be a fiscal 27 project?
I don't think the work could even be started till 27, but if we wait till 27 to allocate the fundage and we don't order equipment till July 1, it will never be done at that point. So if we have our scope brought back to us from the RFD, and we have a vision of what we're going to do moving forward to what equipment we're going to do, we can pre-purchase the equipment before the school year ends and get working on this as soon as the school year ends, which is the next school year.
Michael, couldn't we, I think, Steve, this might be kind of the direction you're kind of leaning towards. If this isn't going to be an expenditure until possibly 27, and I'm not in any way saying this doesn't need to be done. Like I said, I spoke with Lisa years ago and I walked the building, and this has been known for years. If we need to get a design and we want to pre-purchase at the end of this fiscal year and we haven't approved it in the budget, aren't two things potentially true? Number one, we potentially have some money in the non-lapsing account specifically designed for this purpose, I feel like. But number two, we could go to the town for special appropriation as well, especially for something like this, which is a capital expenditure.
Well, first of all, we don't have money in the non-lapsing account. So the question is, do we ask the town to create a non-lapsing account funded partially this year and the balance in 2027? So that's a conversation I can have. And Mike, how much of the expenditure is equipment versus labor, do you think?
Generally what you see with any kind of project like this, it could go 50-50 or it could go roughly third material, 2/3 labor.
Okay. Thanks. Michael, were you gonna say something?
No, I'm fine. Thanks, Steve.
Okay. Lisa, where's Lisa? Oh, there you are, in the upper right-hand side of my screen. Is there more that you'd like to discuss this morning?
Yes. Bill, take it away.
Yeah, I just want to give a
This is
quick
health
update.
insurance.
Yep.
Quick update on health insurance. I know there's been conversation that the numbers that we have presented over the past couple of weeks have been more of an estimate. I have received some updated information as it relates to claims experience for the period July through December. And unfortunately, we are not seeing any kind of improvement as it relates to those claims. As it stands, as of December, our claims experience or loss ratio is pretty much 120%, 20%, which means that the insurance company is paying 20% more than what we have paid in claims. In addition, there's one company that has responded to the RFP that was issued by Brown & Brown. And their first take is that the increase will be somewhat in the tune of 40+% over our current rates. So what we presented.
I'm sorry. I just want to make sure. He's 40.
Yep,
okay.
40. So the rates that we have presented are rates that are from the state partnership plan. And as it stands right now, all indications are that may be the direction that we're headed. We still have not heard from Cigna in terms of what their final numbers will be, but I'm not overly optimistic that we'll see any significant improvements over where we are right now. Just to give some perspective, the state partnership on premium based on the premiums only are somewhat similar to what we have projected for Cigna. Pretty much means that they're pretty much the same cost. The savings that we're seeing are savings related to not needing to fund an HSA, and also the increased funding from the OPEB trust fund for retirees. So I'm saying all that to say that the numbers that we have for health insurance at this point, those can be considered to be solid.
So does that mean, I may be wrong about this. Does that mean the number you gave us where you thought there might be savings is now not the case?
No. The savings that we have, approximately $800,000. Those savings are solid. We do not, at this point, anticipate to see anything better than that. If we are, great, but I do not think that will be the case. And just to give some more perspective, what Weston is seeing in terms of claims experience is not isolated to Weston. The state is also seeing an increase in their claims experience. In fiscal 24, the overall increase for active employees was 2% on the state partnership plan. In November, the state gave their initial projection to roughly be, for Fairfield County, to be about 11%. The state gave an updated percentage in January, and that number increased by 2%. The final numbers will be known in March, but as right now, there's no indication from anywhere that we'll be seeing anything better than what we currently have.
Okay, thanks, so.
So Phil, the savings there, I think you put a finer point on it, right? There are savings that are real, but the savings are not necessarily in the cost and the premium cost. It's in the funding of the HSAs. Is that
correct?
That's okay. Is there any reason to think that we will not be able to make that change if it turns out that that is the best way to move forward? Is there anything vis-a-vis contract related, et cetera, that may preclude us from doing that? And then of course, elevating the cost if the private, if the RFP comes back, that's higher than expected.
Sure. So two pieces to it. The requirement for the state partnership plan is that all groups should be transferred to the plan. The second part of it is that we just need the unions to agree on this move. Again, so if we are to make a change mid contract, it has to be a like-for-like plan, and the state partnership plan is a like-for-like plan. Meaning in terms of services that are offered.
In terms of coverage and services.
Correct. Yeah.
Is there any reason to think that the unions would be not inclined to go ahead and improve and the move if we deemed at that point that was appropriate for us?
At this point, I'm going to say no.
Okay. Just to that end, I just wanted to circle back, Phil, on a question I asked. I don't know if you have the answer. I think Steve sort of looked into this a little bit as well, but I just wanted to be clear on it. I know we're due for a vote soon. It does seem like there are a lot of items here that are still TBDs and placeholders. The question, I guess, is if we voted on it prior to the Board of Finance voting, what is the process by which it could come back to us for reconsideration? Is that something that is a determination for ourselves, or does the Board of Finance have to agree to let us sort of reconsider the budget once again? Do you guys know that answer?
So it's not necessarily say that it comes back to us. If we have new information that will change the budget, then we will present that either to the Board of Selectmen or to the Board of Finance prior to their final votes.
And they can, let's say something came in, I don't know, if something came in, much cheaper, much more expensive, we would present that to them, and then it would be under their consideration as to whether or not to accept the new estimate. Am I thinking about that correctly?
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Right. So ultimately, the Board of Finance has a number in mind. So even if we give them a number plus or minus, it's not necessarily that they're going to accept our number. If the Board of Finance determines that the funding for the Board of Education should be X, and if the number that we've given them is in excess of X, then we would have to find room within our budget to meet their X.
Okay, I think I understand that. I mean, basically, it's they're making a determination. Look, they're taking our recommended budget, then they're making a determination, and then if there was any other changes plus or minus to the numbers that we wanted to we would obviously communicate. They would take that into consideration, but that wouldn't necessarily be us having to re-vote on it. Is that correct?
Normally, anything that is presented to any other board is normally first discussed and approved with the Board of Education.
Yeah.
Right. So there's no subsequent approval if things happen to change, let's say, materially.
When you say discussion, let me better understand that.
No, I was saying that there's no sort of subsequent sort of discussion / vote if things happen to change materially and we need to reconsider, an item or two in the budget. There's none of that. We just present the updated numbers as we find out about them, and then they sort of take that into consideration when they're looking at the pre-approved budget and what they have in mind in terms of the Board of Ed's budget. Is that correct?
From a discussion perspective, if the Board of Finance should reduce the budget, the Board of Education would need to make a determination in terms of what exactly within our budget will be reduced, or similar to what we did last year, was that we just listed the item as a TBD.
Right. Okay.
So just to kind of put a button in, I think what Michael's asking, ultimately, if we vote tomorrow and approve the budget, that is essentially, we're essentially saying at that point, we're in agreement with all aspects of the budget. There are things that I know can change, Phil. The request can go down if there are savings and stuff like that. Really what we're doing is we're saying this is the cap. This is what we've approved, but our work is then done. So if we as Board of Ed don't think certain areas have been thoroughly vetted or looked at, or we think that there's still some more questions about the ability to pick up efficiencies or what programs, utilization and stuff like that. Once we vote, that ship has sailed. It's not right as far as our ability to compel the administration.
Yeah, we voted on the budget. We have to deliver under the charter a budget by February 3rd to the Board of Selectmen.
I think if I may, the important part is, and I would encourage you to read the town charters, Article 9, because what you are voting on is entitled preliminary budget estimate.
Right.
Must be done by, February 3rd, that's Monday. And it goes to the selectmen, and it says, you look at the duties of the Board of Selectmen, they hear the budget, they can suggest things, okay? Then it goes to finance. Finance can tell us it needs to be cut by this amount. I think that, again, I go back to Phil, this is a marathon. Clearly, we want, if there is something that comes up or whatever with anything that it's going to reduce it, then certainly with insurance or whatever, that we would look at that and communicate that, because that, I think, is our fiduciary responsibility to the town. What we're asking you to do this week is to vote on this preliminary budget request. And I think it's interesting the way they write that in the charter. Preliminary budget estimate, okay? Finance can cut. Selectmen can suggest.
One last question for you, Phil, just on the insurance bit. If the unions come back and say, actually, if it's deemed that we want to move to the SPP, then the unions basically vote no, decline. Is there any recourse to that decision? Are we then sort of stuck with the current plan that we have at a potentially elevated cost?
Let's just say, I don't want to say yes or no to that question. I think ultimately what we have to do is whatever it is we have to negotiate with the unions. It may mean that we may have to offer up some concessions to the union, or it could go either way. So it's not as if we're saying to the union, this is the plan, this is what we have to do. We have to really reopen negotiations with the union at that point and see if there's any concessions that either party can give.
Also, part of our challenge is, I know there's been people in the public that are like, how could you vote on this? It's premature. You don't even have these numbers. It takes time to get them. It takes time to get these projections. No one has been trying to stall this. And there is the reality by the charter that we have this date. We are doing the very best we can to move this forward.
There's no reason to be defensive. So, we have a budget
I just want
process.
it clear, because I know I've heard and read what some people are putting out there and saying, and I just want to clarify that we're really working hard here to get the information. We didn't stall on it. This is the timeline. And unfortunately, in a perfect world, the timeline goes with the charter. Here it doesn't. But I trust what Mr. Cross is saying, and I think that this working through this insurance is certainly very doable.
Okay. Anything more, Phil, Lisa?
Yes, there is something more. And it's kind of along what Chad said. So tomorrow we have another Board of Education meeting. There will be public comment at the beginning. We gave our reasons behind why certain programs and things were on this list. To get this, and Phil, I need your help here. If we do these reductions, I believe we will be at a 3.01 budget. Is that correct, Phil?
That's correct, Lisa.
And if we say, you know what, we don't want to go there with a couple of the things and put them back on the list, for example, the drama, the cheerleading, something like that, then we would be at a 3.07, if you will. We are very confident when we look at this. I shouldn't have written the word eliminate project challenge, restructure project challenge, because we did this at the middle school and it was very successful. And we think that this list is appropriate, and it will not diminish the overall educational and co-curricular experience. I guess what I would like is, we're going to send you the technology survey. Dr. Engel is putting together the clean copy so you can look at it. And I want you to really start to think if there's anything else that you would need for tomorrow. We would be happy to provide it. But basically, we're presenting either a 3.01, or if we add a couple of those things on, a 3.07. For all intents and purposes, I think it's a 3% budget, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Aziz, when the finance board was working on different projections, and in the future, they said a 3% budget would be, dare I say, a respectable number.
Yeah,
So
that's the case.
That's the case. So we got there, and we certainly hope that you support it. Thank you.
So can you just tell us, so for tomorrow, you can kind of see, I think, leading into tomorrow's meeting, maybe there isn't full agreement on some of the Board of Ed members of what's been done. Chad, clearly, I think Peter, for that matter, don't want to see any of the cuts that have been presented. I think, to your point, Lisa, Project Challenge, actually, I said to one of my kids, didn't you participate in Project Challenge? Because I would hate to see that cut. It's not being cut. It's just being retooled, so to speak. So tomorrow, are we going to be, are you presenting us essentially two options? One with the recommended cuts that we've talked about, one without? Is it going to be 8 different options? Because there's some of those cuts, like what should we be prepared tomorrow to see?
I think that we listen to the public comment. And then I think that, my suggestion would be is the administrative team will talk this afternoon, but it's going to be, like I said, between a 3.01 and a 3.07. There's no 8 other options. Maybe we can split the difference on the cuts on the list and we can work on that and give us your suggestions to it. But I would sort of come to terms with the 3% budget and see if that is something that you can support, if I'm being clear. Now, if you want something else, please tell us, and we'll look at it differently.
Lisa, just to clarify as well, are we asking the board to vote on all the items for each suggested recommendation that were presented, plus or minus?
I need some help with how you want to do this.
No.
Go ahead.
No, you're going to present a budget. We're not going line by line. Unless people want to, but it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I mean, there's a gazillion lines.
Well, look, in looking at this, in looking at this list and the proposed cuts, I don't want to speak for the administrative team, but I will tell you that, if we decide to put back in another $35,000, that's only a 0.06 increase, which would be a 3.07.
Listen, just present a budget tomorrow that you're
Okay.
comfortable with,
That's fine.
and there'll be obvious discussion.
That's fine. Does that meet everybody's needs here?
Yes.
If there's anything else that anybody wants, please reach out to me and I will make sure you get the answer that you need.
The only item I
Okay.
would ask for Phil for tomorrow is just in even clearer words for myself and the community, how the insurance piece, the 700 some odd thousand, how that you envision impacting potentially our budget in years moving forward. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I feel like there's a potential savings if we go to a state partnership, but then there might not be. And if we do, we lock ourselves in for 3 years. So I just think that we need to be clear. I think there may or may not be a savings this year. I think what you're looking at is the simplicity of, if we know what the premium would be for the state partnership plan, right? So you're kind of using that as this is worst case scenario for fiscal year 25-26. But we then lock ourselves into this for 2 years more, right? Because it's a 3-year agreement. And we exited the state partnership plan, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, because the cost skyrocketed. So we wouldn't be able to exit it for 2 years. Is that right?
That's the risk.
Yeah, and just to add further clarity, it's a commitment. We're pretty much joining with a commitment that will be on the plan for 3 years. If we should exit after, say, year 1, there's a 5% penalty. So there's really a penalty that's associated with exiting the plan prior to the end of the 3 years. So again, I'm still trying to understand what part of the discussion so far has not been clear to you, David.
No, it's not that. I want to make sure I understand that the potential $700,000 savings is based on, we don't know for sure what the premium is going to be from our current carrier. We know what the cost is to go to the state partnership plan, right? And that is been factored in as worst case scenario. So if our current carrier comes in with a lower increase, one presumes we'll go with that. But if they come in with a higher increase, we know the cap is the state partnership plan, right?
Correct.
Okay. But the risk, which Steve validated, the risk is that the state partnership plan is in fact less expensive this year, but now we're locked into the state partnership plan for 2 more years beyond that, which was the very reason we exited the state partnership plan a few years ago, was because the initial rate looked pretty good. And then we could, if I remember correctly, we couldn't exit it because of the teachers' contracts, but as soon as we could exit it, we did.
So again, if in year 2, we determine that the rate increase is more than what we can afford, we can make a decision in year 2 to exit the plan if we can find a cheaper alternative. The cost associated with leaving the state partnership plan after year 1 is a 5% penalty. So again, it's a commitment, but if the state is telling us in year 2 that we're going to be faced with a 20% increase, again, everything goes back to claims. If our claims experience is such that it is a 20% increase is justified, I cannot tell you that a carrier is going to look at that and say, you know what, Weston, based on your claims experience at 120 to 130% loss ratio, I'm going to give you a reduction in your rates. I can't guarantee that. I'm saying that this is the best option that's out there right now because of the ability to pool all the claims. The rates fluctuate. Again, so we have had years where the state, as their initial numbers, where it has come in higher, and come March, that number settled for a lower amount. This year, they're starting higher. It's a possibility that it could be less, but I think where we are at 11 to 13% is really the cap on those rates for fiscal 26.
Okay. So we have a motion to adjourn and take it up tomorrow.
So moved.
There's a second? Hey, thanks, everybody.